Based on Rabbanan. So the pasuk, the parsha of Karbanos begins in Vayikra. Starts with saying, Adam ki yakriv mikem karban, min ha-behema min ha-bakar min ha-tzayin takrivas karbanchem. Then the next pasuk says, Kishuaymer min ha-bakar lamata. It says, Im oila karbanim min ha-bakar. If he brings an oila, a sacrifice, if it's from the bakar, if it's from cattle. Shein Talmud Leimer, it didn't need to say that, if it's from the cattle. Why is it saying min ha-bakar? It started off saying min ha-bakar min ha-tzayin. In the first pasuk, why does the second pasuk need to say min ha-bakar? Talmud Leimer, I'm sorry, Shein Talmud Leimer doesn't need to say, Ela lahoitzias ha-treifa. It's coming to exclude, that extra word is coming to exclude a treifa. Gemara asks, Valei dinhu. Really, I have a kal v'chaimer. I don't need to exclude treifa, that you can't bring a karban that's a treifa. I know it from a kal v'chaimer. Uma balmum shemeteres lehedyait. A balmum, okay, it has one eye is bigger than the other. You're allowed to shecht an animal like that. That's not a problem, right? One leg is bigger than the other. It's a perfectly fine animal. You can shecht it and eat it. Muteres lehedyait. However, asur legavaya, but that's a mum for a karban. So treifa, shasur lehedyait. If a balmum that a regular person can eat, but you can't bring as a karban, so a treifa that a regular person cannot eat, right? A treifa means that has a problem in the lungs. It's not going to live. Say in a din shasur legavaya, is it not a kal v'chaimer that you can't bring it as a karban? If a balmum that the regular person can eat, you can't bring as a karban, so a treifa, which is much worse, a regular person can't eat. For sure you can't bring it as a karban. Gemara says, no, it's not a kal v'chaimer. You need the pasuk. Why? Because chil v'dam yechichu. The fats, the fats in the blood will prove. We couldn't find the English one.
Okay, no problem. I have to go to the library to the books. Okay.
Want to take one of these?
No.
Doesn't matter. Does it? Okay. You want to follow along just in the Hebrew? Because we have an extra Hebrew.
Okay.
We have the big Hebrew. And that's the one. Okay, so the Gemara says, Chila v'dam yechichu. That the forbidden fats in the blood, it's on page 5. And then they'll show them where it is. So the forbidden fats and the blood will prove. Why? Because a regular person is not allowed to eat the chela, forbidden fat, right? A regular person is not allowed to eat blood. Nevertheless, we take the fat, we take the blood, and we put it on the mizbeach. The mizbeach is able to eat what we're not allowed to eat. We're discussing why we need a special pasuk to teach me that you can't bring a karban that's a treifa. And we said we have a kal v'chaimer. You don't need a pasuk, you have a kal v'chaimer. Kal v'chaimer is if a balmum is not good for a karban. But a person can shecht and eat a balmum. So a treifa, which a person can eat, for sure shouldn't be good. We're discussing why we need a pasuk to teach me that you can't bring an animal that's a treifa, that's sick, as a sacrifice.
How do we know?
We know it from an extra word in the verse. It says from the cattle. That teaches me no treifa. We're asking, why do you need a pasuk? I can figure that out. If a person's not allowed to eat it, for sure it can't go on the mizbeach. We have a kal v'chaimer. Something that has a blemish, you can't bring on the mizbeach. Yeah. But a person can eat it. So something that's a treifa, a person can eat for sure. So he said, no, it's not a good proof. Why? Because the forbidden fats in blood, a person's not allowed to eat it. Where does it go? On the mizbeach. So you see, it's not a good svara that just because you can't eat it doesn't mean that the mizbeach can't eat it. Because you see, the mizbeach can have forbidden fats in blood. So we need a pasuk for for treifa, to tell me that maybe the Mizbeach can have a treifa also. So forbidden fats and blood, Shasurim lehedin matarm legvaya. Says, no, that's not a good proof. Malach chila v'dam shkein ba mechlal heter. What's going on with chila v'dam? The whole animal is kosher. You have these two items, the forbidden fats in the blood that are forbidden, but the whole animal is kosher. But Tamer b'treifa, treifa is totally different. Treifa shekula asura. V'loi tamer teres legvaya. I don't know, they take that out. The whole treifa is asur. That you don't find anywhere where something should be entirely forbidden for the Jewish people. It should be permitted on the Mizbeach. That you don't find. And the forbidden fats in the blood, the animal is kosher. Those two items, they're forbidden that you put them on. They're forbidden for the people, but you can put them on. But that's a different story. The whole treifa is forbidden. The whole animal is forbidden. Where it says Malika Techiach. You don't need a pasuk. Why? Because I'll show you trying to figure out which way, because it keeps like going back and forth. It says like this, that we're looking for things that are forbidden for the Jewish people and permitted on the altar. If you can prove that you have things that are forbidden for the Jewish people, but they're permitted on the altar, then I need a pasuk for treifa. Because treifa is forbidden for the Jewish people, I need a pasuk to teach me that it's going to be forbidden on the altar. If you never find anything that's forbidden for the Jewish people that's permitted on the altar, then I don't need a pasuk. And that's a kasha. Why do we have a pasuk? So here we're saying that malika is something that's forbidden for the Jewish people, but it's permitted on the altar. So this is an explanation why I do need a pasuk. Malika, the animal, the bird is slaughtered with the fingernail. That's allowed to go on the altar, but that's not allowed to be done outside the Beis Hamikdash. Shekula asura. Shekula iser. If a regular Jewish person does malika, the whole bird is asur. Why do we have to say the whole bird? Because we just said that you can't prove to me from the fats in the blood that goes on the altar that a treifa should be able to go on the altar, because the fats in the blood is just one section of an animal. But the treifa is the whole animal. So you say, okay, I'll get you from the other side. I'll get you from somewhere else. Malika, the whole animal, is forbidden for the Jewish people. It's only good for a sacrifice, the whole, and this is referring to the whole animal. But nevertheless, a regular person can't do this. And it's permissible on the altar. The treifa is exactly the same. It should be permissible. Where it says, Mala Malika Shekain Kedushasai Sarta. You can still say, yeah. We're going to have good questions today.
Let's see. Next to your son. That's the problem.
Gemara says, 1 second. You can't prove from Malika. What is the prohibition of Malika for everyone? This is like it's interesting how it describes it. We never explained it like this, but the Gemara is saying that the act of Malika sanctifies it to the extent that that's why no one else is allowed to do Malika. But by a treifa, Mashenken b'treifa, we skipped the parentheses. Shenken d'shasa sarta. The fact that Jewish people can't eat a treifa is not because it's so holy. by Malika, the reason why we don't do Malika is because that's so holy. That's what sanctifies the sacrifice, but not by a treifa. So therefore, the fact that you have something that's forbidden for the Jewish people but permissible on the altar is not a proof that a treifa. It doesn't tell me anything about a treifa, because that permissibility that you have by Malika, that it goes on the altar, that's the act itself that sanctifies it, which makes it forbidden for the Jewish people. So therefore, we're left with nothing that's permissible on the altar is forbidden to the Jewish people entirely.
Nothing that is.
Nothing that's permissible on the altar is forbidden to the Jewish people entirely. You'll say Malika, say that's special, that sanctifies it. That's what forbids it to the Jewish. The forbidden fats in the blood, that's just one item of the entire animal. But you don't have an entire animal that's forbidden on the altar. Therefore, if a balmum, something that has a blemish, is forbidden on the altar, but the Jewish people can eat it, so a treifa, which we can't eat, for sure should be forbidden on the altar. So why do we need a verse? B'imi shavta. And if you're going to have a response, so so when it says the verse, minabakar, like yes a treifa, it's coming to teach me something. So the Gemara got out of this in a very strange way. It says, well, if you'll come up with some sort of question, then yes, the pasuk will be necessary. So the Gemara says, ma im heshavta. What is the question? That was our point. Our point was we were looking for a question that some sort of proof, some sort of response to that kal v'chomer, and say the kal v'chomer is invalid. It doesn't work. It's not logical, and then you'll need the pasuk. But we didn't do that. You just said, well, if you will, so then you'll need the pasuk. Amar Rav, Rav says, Mishum de'ikla meimar minchas ha'omer techiach. Well, you can say that the omer can prove. We're on 5b. It's about 15 lines from the bottom.
Amen.
See, the omer, again, what we're doing here is we have a pasuk that tells me that a treifa, an animal that's sick, cannot be brought as a sacrifice. We're saying, well, that's obvious. You don't need that pasuk. Why is it obvious? He says, well, if you can't eat it, for sure you can't bring it as a sacrifice. We know from a balmum, something that has a blemish, which you can eat, you can't bring it. You can't bring it as a sacrifice. For sure, something that's sick. He said, well, what about the omer? The sacrifice that's brought on the second day of Pesach. You're not allowed to eat that grain. You didn't bring the omer yet. Who can eat the grain? The mizbeach. Okay? So, asur lehedyet u'miteres legavaya. So you see that there are certain things which are forbidden to the Jewish people, and nevertheless they could be brought on the altar. So maybe a treifa as well. Maybe a sick animal. The Jewish people can't eat it. You can bring it on the altar. He says, whoa, 1 second. Mala minchas omer shekein materes chadash. The minchas omer has a special function. That's not a treifa doesn't have a special function. The minchas omer has a function where it allows the new grain to be eaten. The treifa doesn't do that. We're back to the question, so why do we need a pasuk to say that a treifa can't go on the altar? Umar says, well, b'shvius. On the 7th year, in the Shemitah year, the omer doesn't permit the new grain because you didn't plant the grain. It's the 7th year. Umar says, well, shvius nami shkem ater svichen. There is grain that grows on its own. It's just because the seeds fell and it just grew wild. It says, well, where it says Rabbi Akiva. Maybe we're going according to Rabbi Akiva, that says that there is really no wild grain that's growing in the Shemitah, because Rabbi Akiva says that the wild grain, once there's no wild grain that's out in the field, then you have to take the grain from your house and put it into the field. In other words, during the Shemitah year, you have to eat together with, you have to you can't take possession of it if there's no grain, if there's no fruits out there for the animals. You can't take it all inside your house and leave nothing outside. So after the second rain, which is whenever, end of Cheshvan or whatever, after the second rain, there's no grain left outside for the animals, so you can't really have the grain stored inside your house. It's called shasabir, where you have to take, you can't have the storage in your house, you have to bring it outside. So we're saying now that even if it's Shemitah, where you have wild grain, but according to Rabbi Akiva, there is no real grain that's in your house. So therefore, you will have a case of something that has no function, has no usage, no function, which is the Karban Omer. Nevertheless, the Mizbeach can eat it, and you can't. So Amar Rav Acha bar Abba. Usually it's Rava. The Rav Ashi, the Rabbi Akiva Nami Nifre. You can also ask according to Rabbi Akiva that Ma'al Menachos Daf came Materes Chadash b'chutz la'aretz. Well, it's a big machlokes. It's relevant even today. Is there chadash? You see, we've been learning that the new grain is not allowed to be eaten until the Omer is brought. So, for example, now, this used to be not a problem in America. It used to be we had storage, and we were always using old grain. But then we became such a generous country. We were giving our grain to all the other countries. So our storage is we're not storing the grain the way we used to. So the grain that we're getting is actually from the new crops. So.
But the Admor Zaken was not Makbid on Kemach Yesha. It's correct or not?
One second. So the question is a machlekes Tanaim, a machlekes in the Mishnah. Do you have to be careful with the new grain before Pesach, before the second day of Pesach, outside the land of Israel? Are you required to eat yashan? Yashan means the old grain. So there's two opinions. The question is, how will you learn when you will come into the land? It says when you will come into the land, you don't eat from the new grain until this is brought. What does it mean when you come into that? It started then, or does it mean, but it applies everywhere, or does it mean that it's referring to only when you come into the land, that it's only applicable in the land of Israel? So there's different opinions about that. So now we're saying that Shemitah, we know, only applies in the land of Israel. We're looking for something that's forbidden on the altar, that's forbidden for the Jewish people, but permissible on the altar. If you can find that, permissible on the altar, but forbidden for the Jewish people, that will help us out in explaining to us why I need a verse to teach me that I can't bring a treifa as a sacrifice. Why? A treifa is forbidden for the Jewish people. But nevertheless, maybe it could be brought as a sacrifice on the altar. As you see, other things are forbidden for the Jewish people and they're brought as sacrifices. What is that other thing? The new grain. We said, well, the new grain, that's not a good proof because the new grain has some sort of function. The Omer has a function. It permits the grain to be eaten for the first time. So that's a special function. A treifa is not a special function.
No, but the treifa is a blemish in the animals.
Right.
And you cannot bring blemish to Hashem. So you cannot bring...
Oh, you're saying that a treifa itself is a balmum. That's a good question.
Rabbi.
The seat, all of a sudden. It's a good question.
Next time
let me tell you the answer. The answer is like this. The answer is that a blemish...
Always you are complaining, don't give him answer. Now give me answer. Thank you.
I'll give you later. Let's hold it.
Okay.
I don't want to... so the blemish is visible. The treifa is not visible.
But sometimes if the broken legs...
That's true.
It's
sometimes
visible.
it's visible. Sometimes the treifa could be a blemish as well, but sometimes the treifa could be not visible, and it's not considered a blemish. A blemish are all visible on
the outside.
Okay. So now the Gemara is saying, but 1 second, you'll never have a non-functional omer, because outside the land of Israel you have all that grain that needs to be permitted. And even if you're going to say, even if you're going to say that the new grain outside the land of Israel is not biblically forbidden, you see the Gemara discusses what's going on with Shekain ba lahater lav shebaseicha. But what about the Omer itself? The carbon itself, you can't eat it until you bring it. It's forbidden to eat that grain that's in the Omer itself, that's in the sacrifice itself, the barley. It was the barley. So it is functional. It's permitting itself. So Amalei Ravach Midifti LeRavina. Ihachi Treifanami Takriv. If you're going to say that the function of a sacrifice is that it permits itself by the Omer, the function of the Omer is that it permits itself to be eaten, and we could have said that a treifa would be brought as a sacrifice, okay? Even though we can't eat it on our own. But maybe you could bring it as a sacrifice. You see some things that you can't do are brought as sacrifice. Like the Omer. You can't eat it, but you can bring it as a sacrifice. What happens when you're done with the sacrifice?
It's burned.
You get to eat the Omer. It permitted itself. So maybe a treifa could permit itself too. Treifa nami, takr v'tat alav shebaseicha. If we don't have the verse, you'd be allowed to bring it, and it will permit itself. Rather, we have another question that we can have. Is malamin chasemish ke mitzvasa b'kach? The Omer can't be a proof, because the Omer, you have no other option. That's the way that it needs to be brought. You're not allowed to bring the Omer from the old grain. It needs to be from the new grain. A treifa, go bring another animal. You don't need to bring a treifa. So therefore, we're asking, why do we need a pasuk? We could have learned from the Kal V'chomer that if you can't eat it, for sure the Beis Hamikdash, the Mizbeach can't have it. Rish Lakish Amar Mishum De'ikla Meimer Mefatim Aktayrus Yechiach. Well, Lakish says that the one that mixes the ketairas will prove. She'asur lehadyet. It's forbidden for an individual, for a private person, and it's permissible to the mizbeach. The Gemara says, "Mefatim gavruhu." The one that mixes it is a human being. Ella, rather, pitam akteris yechiach. Rather, the mixture of the ketairas will prove that we're not allowed to use the ketairas. And it's permissible on the altar. Ketairas is permissible on the altar, but you're not allowed to have ketairas done like that in your house. And so therefore, if the ketairas you're allowed to bring on the mizbeach, but you're not allowed to have it on your own, that's a proof that maybe the treifa you're allowed to bring as a sacrifice, even though you can't have it. You see, certain things are permissible on the altar. It says, the ketairas, you have no other way of doing it. You're commanded to do it. Go bring a different animal. You don't need a treifa. It's not like the Torah commanded you to bring a treifa. Mar Berei de Ravina Mishum Diklamemer Shabbos Yechichu. Mar Berei de Ravina, Mar, the son of Ravina, says that Shabbos will prove. Shasur lehedyet imiteres legavaya. There are certain things that you're allowed to do on Shabbos in the temple for the altar, but you're not allowed to do it in your house. Mala Shabbos. Okay, so what are those things? You're allowed to bring the sacrifices on Shabbos. You can't do shchita and roasting and all of that in your house. Just 1 second. Mala Shabbos came hutter mechlale etzel hedyet. There are certain things that you're allowed to do on Shabbos in your house. B'mila. If there's a bris on Shabbos, you're allowed to do it.
Yes.
So Shabbos has certain. Don't use Shabbos as this in this, because Shabbos has certain permission sometimes. Umar says to mila tzarech too. The bris is a private thing. The bris is not a private thing. Mila mitzvahi. That's a mitzvah. That's for God. Ela mala Shabbos ke mitzvasa b'kach. Rather, we can say there's a problem with using Shabbos in this, because Shabbos, you're obligated to bring the sacrifices then. You don't have another choice. You can't bring the sacrifices for Shabbos on Sunday. You have to bring them on Shabbos. Ravada bar Abba Amar Mishum. Ravada bar Abba says, Mishum diklamem kalayim yechichu. Well, we can use kalayim to prove. Shasrum lehedyet mitarim legavaya. That it's forbidden for a person to wear kalayim, but the kayanim, one of their belts, one of the garments.
The Kohen Gadol only, no?
It's machlekes, but the
The thing is, this place is machloket. Only
Just
family.
can never agree.
Jeffrey was one, some apple, some banana. Look on
What?
Banana, apple, is nothing.
yeah. Rashi says that we're talking about the belt of the kohen gadol,
הגרטל שלו.
right?
כהן גדול, נו. תגיד
Right.
איזה.
However,
Genius.
it's not you, it's the chair.
Huh? No, I
chair.
said, if you sit here, you'll be genius.
Okay.
I didn't say me. I know that I'm not.
It's machlekes in Yuma. If a kohen hedyet also had kalayim, or if it was only linen.
רמב"ם הגדול כותב, זה רק כהן גדול.
Okay.
על הגרטה, זה היה מעורב בפשטן ווול.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing. You see, Rashi actually says, "Avnei shel kohen."
אמנו של
A
כהן.
kohen, not a kohen gadol. The Shita Mekabetzes adds in that it means a kohen gadol.
Yeah.
So you're right. You're right. Okay.
Yeah, but we wear tzitzits, no?
That's the commentaries ask on this. Well, first, the Gemara is going to discuss this. The Gemara is going to discuss this. 1 second. The Gemara is going to discuss this itself.
It's going like this, Rabbi. The electricity.
Jetzt is next.
A,
Pressure's on.
no, it's
Okay.
a bananas.
So it says Malakalayim Shkin Hutzim Mechlal Neitzin Hadya Petzitzis. See, it's working. A regular person also has an exemption to wear kalayim. Kalayim means the wool and linen together. Not just a kohen gadol or a regular kohen possibly, but even a regular person can do that. He wears tzitzis. How does he have kalayim and tzitzis? Well, the garment could be made out of linen. You're allowed to make the garment out of linen, but the tzitzis would be made out of wool. Especially the tchelas string would be wool. So the tzitzis tzarech edit. Is tzitzis a private thing? Mitzvah. That's a mitzvah. Ella, rather, malakalayim shemitzvasi bekach. Yeah, but the question here is that's the way that the garment of the kohen or the kohen gadol needs to be made. So you can't prove to anything else that, you see over there that it's done like that, it's permissible for the altar, permissible for the kohenim. Other places it's forbidden, so you see that you can do that. No, that's not a proof, because that's the way it needs to be done. Rav Shisha Breder Avida Yam Mishum Deklamem Alehad Dina V'Tesi B'Matzad. Rav Shisha says, well, actually, you see, we really could have understood this from two things together. Even though we disproved each time we tried to prove that there are certain things that are brought on the altar that are forbidden for everyone else, but it's permissible on the altar. We disproved each one of them that you really don't have. But nevertheless, if you would take two things together, you would be able to prove it. It's called a ma'atzad. Ma'atzad means the common denominator, the common factor between two things would be able to prove this. It says like this: Ma'ala malika sheken kedusha sarta. When it comes to malika, we said that that's not a good proof, because the reason why it's forbidden to the Jewish people is because that's the way that the sacrifice is sanctified. That's why it's forbidden. He said, well, chilav adam yachichu, that's not the factor that makes forbidden fats and blood forbidden to everyone. It's not because it goes on the altar. It says, mala chilav adam shkin ba mechlal heter. 1 second, chilav adam has its own problem. The forbidden fats in the blood are not entirely forbidden. It's only those sections of the animal that are forbidden. The entire animal is permissible. Malika techiach. So let the Malika prove, because the factor in the Malika is that the entire animal is forbidden, right? For a regular person does Malika outside the temple. B'chazar adin. So we're going to return, this ruling will revolve, will go around in a circle, because each one has a factor that the other one doesn't have. And the strength of this one is not the strength of that one. And the strength of that one is not the strength of this one. However, we have to look at the common factor between them. Why are they each forbidden for the regular people but permissible on the altar? Is because the common factor. What are the common factors? That is one common factor that they have. Both of them are forbidden to Jewish people. They're permissible on the altar. Afani treifa. I could bring a treifa, which is forbidden for the Jewish people, and tehemuters l'gvaya, it should be permissible on the altar. The Gemara says, 1 second. The common factor here is also not going to be common, because when it comes to the forbidden fats in Malika, that's the way you're obligated to do it. A treifa, go get another animal. You have no obligation to bring a treifa. Get a different animal. It doesn't say in the Torah you have to bring a treifa. Ravashi says, because you can say me'ikara dedina parcha. You can ask on the original Kal V'chomer. What was our original Kal V'chomer? Hecha kamaisila. How would we understand that you can bring a treifa on the altar? That you can't bring a treifa.
You cannot bring, yes.
We would understand it from a balmum. A balmum is something that has a blemish, a visible blemish.
That's what I said in the beginning.
You're doing great.
Thank you, Rabbi. Next time I need 2 cookies because today I was very good. One banana and 1 apple. So that's all. I
balmum.
sent the picture to his wife to say she did study.
A balmum has a blemish. It's an animal with a blemish. You're not allowed to bring it as a sacrifice, but nevertheless you're allowed to slaughter it. The Gemara asks, you can't compare a balmum to a treifa, because a kohen that's a balmum has the same law as an animal that's a balmum. A kohen that's a balmum cannot do the service. An animal that's a balmum cannot be brought in the service.
But why?
However, by a treifa, a kohen that's a treifa, a kohen that's sick, can do the service. An animal that's a treifa, we're trying to say, cannot be part of the service. So you can't compare. How would we know a treifa cannot be part of the service? Not because we compare it to a balmum, because that comparison is not perfect. Because the kohen